Ecom is terrifying for tech because most companies do not need 100% uptime, right? If a SaaS company goes down, it's not that bad. Communications company goes down, not ideal. Ecom goes down, you are losing money right now. I experienced this firsthand. I was a tech lead, a 500 million D2C brand, which is like 9 mil a week, which is like 1.3 mil a day. So peak period, it could easily be like 200, 250 an hour, which means if it goes down for like half an hour, that's someone's salary. So knowing the risk it poses, how do we fix it? There's only really two ways. You've got prevention and you've got cure. I've done videos on prevention, they'll be around somewhere. Today, I'm talking about fixing and doing it ASAP. The first step in fixing is diagnosis. You need to be aware of the problem, but you have hundreds of SKUs, hundreds of landing pages. Code is going out every day. How do you stay on top of everything? Which brings us to today's topic, automated testing. It's testing, but it's automated. Don't overthink it, that's it. You use code and freelancers to check on your warehousing and your shipping, your competitors to get all these data points. Why not also use these same approaches to check on the health of your website? There are 3 ways you can do it, and I'm going to be contrasting and comparing them for you so you can decide what is going to be the best to stop your site going down. The first one, you'll be pleased to know, is off-the-shelf tools. So there are already solutions that make this available. The example I'm going to use today is BrowserStack. This tool lets you create user journeys, which is basically just if you were to manually go on the website and you wanted to go from homepage to collection to cart, you could do this via this tool. It's pretty straightforward. There's no code required. They have their own UI that kind of does this. Ideally, you would build out your most important flows. So the most common flow that takes a user to the checkout, or the most common add to cart flow, whether that's like homepage to collection. You can run through these things yourself and check that everything's working. Bonus points if you organize it by which pages make the most revenue. Certain products are just going to bring in more money. So you want to prioritize it by the most common user journey and also by the most common products and make sure the biggest revenue bringers are at least functional. This is the easiest way to get set up and it's definitely the fastest. However, it is the least robust. You can program user journeys and tests very simply and quickly. However, it's not going to catch everything and it's not the same as, someone manually going through and looking at everything. You might be able to go to the checkout and you might be able to purchase the product. However, maybe there's a styling issue on the product price or the compare price isn't correct. It's not going to flag these things unless you program them in. And I doubt you're going to do that for each and every individual thing on this tool. Quick to get started at first for simple things, but for the more complex stuff, it does actually take a lot longer than, say, using manual testing, which I'll get to later. So it does take some elbow grease, but if you just want a quick setup and check for the primary things, like, adding to cart on pages, going to the checkout, excellent tool to start with. Potential downside is you get charged based on the amount of minutes that you run. So if you wanted to run this test, say, once a month, just to make sure that everything on your site's working fine, that makes sense. Depending on how many pages and SKUs you run it on, could be kind of costly. If you wanted to run it every deployment, so if every day you're putting out new code and then you want to run this test to make sure everything's happening, the bill can rack up. But that's what you pay for having the nice UI and for being quick to start. I would recommend using this approach for the major things that you can just get a handle on now, especially if you don't have your own in-house tech department, just because you don't need to code anything. Okay, number 2, manually building a web scraper, which is kind of what the first version did, but you do it in-house instead of using a third-party source. This is the hardest, but it is the most customizable. It's hard because people need to maintain this code. So as well as building out and maintaining the tests, people also need to build out and maintain the code. That being said, once it is built, it is by far the cheapest to run. You can do it as many times as you want, and you can actually build it into your development workflow. So for example, if someone uses GitHub on the Shopify to update the website, you can have something that runs a test every time there's a new deployment to the site and you don't even need to do it yourself. So automatically it just runs and tests everything. And at scale, it is cheap. It's expensive because you need to hire the devs to build it and it takes time. Once it's built, you can run it as many times as you want for no real cost. The tools I have experience with are Selenium and Puppeteer, and they basically just let you build a user journey like you would on BrowserStack, but you do it all with code instead. It is a lot more detailed because in theory, a developer that's half decent on web tech will be able to test for just about anything, whereas BrowserStack, there's finite options. I wouldn't recommend hiring someone to just build out the test and then get rid of them, or like freelancing someone to build these out, because there is a degree of maintenance that you'll need. And especially if they're baked into your pipeline and they keep failing for some unknown reason, and then your devs have to fix it and it's not their code, it could potentially be a little bit tricky. So I would suggest, if you're going to do this, actually build it out with your in-house team and have them maintain it. And number 3, the one that you're probably already using at the moment, is just manually have somebody test it. Obviously, this is completely dependent on labor cost, which is very different in different countries. So I would highly recommend outsourcing. You probably already have some internal process at the moment where you QA and check things. You just got to actually document it, make a SOP for the things that you want people to look at. So it's the exact same as building out the user journey in, for example, BrowserStack. You just do it via instruction. There is a really cool tool called Scribe, which basically lets you do this on autopilot. You can just turn it on, do the journey you want it to do, and it will turn these into instructions. And I guess in theory as well, you could use AI to translate languages in, for overseas talent potentially. Again, obviously, you just want to organize this by the most important flows and have people manually test. The downside to this is it probably takes the longest to set up because you actually need to find the people to do it. You have to onboard them, you pay a salary, blah, blah, blah. But it is the most robust. Pricing scales with time. So similar to how BrowserStack will charge you for the amount of time that you spend using it, it's the same with labor cost. If you wanted to run this once every month, it's not going to be that bad. Once every week, a bit more pricey. If you wanted to run it every day after a deployment, fine. Also a little bit tricky to have something that runs on the fly. So like, let's say you do 4 deployments a day and you want a team that is on the ground to be able to check these things. It's going to be a little bit more expensive because you have to pay for wait time as well. Whereas if you just had some cadence of like 1 p.m. every day, they check everything on the site, might make a little bit more sense, and you just pay them for a few hours. So if you would like to find your bugs before your users do and save yourself thousands in lost commerce, these are the approaches I would recommend. Like I said, there's going to be some videos somewhere for preventing these things from even happening. It's not always 100% foolproof. You do need both sides, but useful resource. I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, get at me in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts.